Hey everybody, how's it going? Wanted to get started on the different stuff that we have. Let's see here. So, run the group, we've got, I know we did some stuff on domestic violence, the forming audio, so that's what it was. So, I'll get this one going and be right back, actually. So, here we are. Oh, it's not playing today.
Welcome to our first lecture on group stages. In this lecture, we will be looking at the first stage of group development, forming, as part of our group skills in substance abuse counseling course.
So here it is for you.
As we look over the objectives for the week, I want to remind you to review the chapters for the week prior to viewing the lecture, as it is intended to supplement your reading. By the end of the week, you should be able to identify the factors necessary for forming a group and describe the tasks of a beginning group. As your book points out, there are many ways to categorize and describe the stages that functional groups go through, and despite the differences in labels, most agree that groups go through between 4 and 5 stages in the life of a group. Back in the 1970s, 2 researchers named Tuckman and Jensen identified 5 stages of group development: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjoining. This still stands as a very common way for discussing group development. You may refer to the table in your book on page 84 if you want to see a comparison of a few different ways that authors have conceptualized the stages and transitions of group development. Forming a group is a process that takes several steps, and although some of the steps may be completed at the same time, none may be skipped if the group is going to form properly and thrive. First, every group relies on a clear and thoughtful rationale for existence. Groups that attempt to form without a strong rationale are likely to be unproductive and potentially harmful for their members. Leaders must also decide on the theoretical framework from which to work, and the theoretical format should be appropriate for the purposes of the group. The successful formation of a group also relies on practical planning, like the meeting time and place, and leaders should consider potential obstacles in planning this group. Considering how will members get to the meeting. If the group's intended for a certain population, say school-aged children or elderly people, transportation may be a specific issue to address. Publicized group is another consideration that is addressed during the forming stage, and it's important to keep in mind that how a group is announced influences both the ways that it will be received by potential members and also the kind of people who will join. Take some time to consider whether word of mouth, personal contact, and/or written announcements will best suit your intended audience, and that will contribute to the intentionality of your group formation. Screening and pre-training are processes that involve meeting potential members either individually or in a group format to determine who should join a group and who should not, by identifying needs, expectations, and commitment, challenging myths and conceptions, and conveying information to those potential members. This is an opportunity not only for group leaders to select members, but also for potential members to make sure that the group is something they're truly interested in. Once members have been selected, pre-training serve as almost an orientation session to help members get acclimated. The selecting of group members and group leaders can be seen as an outcome of the screening and pre-training, with leaders selecting group members and group members selecting to be part of the group with those leaders. Once we have a group, there are a number of tasks that must be accomplished during the first session, including dealing with apprehension, reviewing goals and contracts, specifying rules, setting limits, promoting positive interchange among members, and resolving potential group problems. A certain level of anxiety is considered a natural part of beginning groups, and group leaders can address anxiety directly in the group or work to clarify any issues that seem to arise as a result of member anxiety. Reviewing goals and contracts with the group is an opportunity to state the purpose of the group during the first session and allow members to share more about their own personal goals. Although some groups may have an established set of group rules, the first session is a great time to review these rules and also allow members to make contributions to the rules. Stating rules in positive terms rather than negative terms will help set the tone of the group. For instance, rather than having a rule against violence, the group could state that members will respect the physical and psychological safety of others at all times. Limits help members understand boundaries in the group, and limits can be addressed during the initial session, but must also be addressed when members test them in the group setting, either by breaking rules or norms. Group leaders can promote positive interactions among group members by being enthusiastic, by drawing out members, holding focus on interesting topics, or shifting the focus when topics are irrelevant or interesting to only a few members, by cutting off any hostile or negative interactions as well. There are a number of problems that can occur during the formation of a group and afterward, some of which involve people and some of which involve process. Subgroups are one such example of a problem that can be a group process where cliques of members band together and may become troublesome. Leaders must remain tuned in to interaction patterns and promote interchange among members, potentially by providing more direction for interaction through exercises or through activities. Your textbook authors also addresses with group member behavior, and the caution that I want to echo as you consider difficult member roles during the first session is that the tendency to label members based on their behavior can be incredibly distracting and disrupt the success of a group. Rather than labeling members based on potentially difficult behavior, it can be helpful instead to see that behavior as a symptom of an issue that's developed in the group and approach it with an open mind. For instance, silent members may be feeling hostile or attempting to withdraw from the group, but they may also shy, reflective, or are simply slow to assert themselves. Instead of seeing a silent member as difficult, it can be helpful to ask a simple open-ended question like, what do you think about what the other member is saying? Pages 102 to 104 provide strategies for the beginning stage of a group, and I would encourage you to review these pages carefully as they're quite helpful. Over the course of the next 3 weeks, I'll ask you to view clips to illustrate the issues we're discussing. To access the videos, you may need to sign in using your UC. In summary, forming is characterized by initial caution associated with any new experience, attempting to avoid being rejected by others. During this first stage of group development, group members try to be superficial, center conversation around historical or future events that do not have a direct impact on the group. Tasks during this beginning stage include dealing with apprehension, reviewing member goals and contracts, specifying rules, setting limits, and promoting positive interchange. This serves to conclude our lecture on forming.
All right, so as you guys see, forming the group will take a little time. You all, for your assignment, are just leading the first group, or whichever one you choose. If it's week 1 of Girl Circle, you can also do weeks 1 through 10. So any of those are good. So part of this will be theoretical for you because you won't be actually leading the group after some of the challenges, which is what we're getting into in this next part. It's about storming and norming. Let me see if it'll let me zoom in on this. Okay, it does. And so some of the other things that you'll do while you lead a group, this could be when you're in at the agency that you're doing an internship at, or when you're learning how the agency runs things. That is part of it. And what you do to lead that group with the implementation of the group is helpful. This one doesn't say which actual week it is on here, but implementation is when you kind of get the group to run. So I know some of you are looking up something that you can run on the internet otherwise. Others are looking up what you can do with some groups, and that's helpful because sometimes you do have to get very creative to keep folks' attention. I mean, this is the same in any group that you lead, including if you ever did adjunct, say, for example, teaching adjunct. Some folks do that. The trauma group we led at Lighthouse was another good example of ways that you can get creative about leading the group. Is sometimes using sensory-based things are helpful. Sometimes using horticulture therapy is another sensory-based one, but there's this independent social worker that has something about relationship recovery in trauma, and I wanted to get into that. If it doesn't kick me off, if I notice it says that it's kicking me off, I will stop it and try to finish saying what she said with you guys.
In my groups, I let people know that we are not going to deal with the present issues that are going on in their life, which is a big shift for them.
Right.
Most of them are coming in with career issues or marital issues or depression, parenting, and what I say to them is that the key to shifting those is in the past. And what I mean by that is that we all start out as kids with a certain program that comes to us because of our childhood experience. Kids are like sponges, and they kind of take on whatever the parents are mirroring them, whatever experience forms them. And very young, they get this program. Yep. And that program is really hard to change. It's kind of cemented in. The other issue that often comes up with people is about what is trauma. What do you consider a traumatic childhood? And I have a much broader definition. And again, based on the research that I've been looking at about what trauma is. And often in the beginning, it was just an alcoholic parent, you were sexually abused, you were beaten. Those are really clear.
Really blatant.
Really blatant. Yes.
Yeah.
Now we're starting to see that one of the biggest traumas is neglect. And for many of my clients, they were like, I never saw my father, so it wasn't a problem. Well, you didn't have a father. That's a huge deal. And the other thing is, what we're learning is that it's the emotional attachment between the parents and the child that is most critical in terms of whether a child does well or not. And so that's often hidden. You can have a family that looks pretty good on the outside, the kids look nice, they go on vacations, they seem okay, but feelings are just not tolerated. Or there isn't enough warmth, or there isn't enough physical touch, or certain emotions are shamed. And so that has just opened up to me the field of trauma to include a lot more people who are excluded within. What I tell people is that I think parents all do the best that they can do, given what they went through. I mean, there's two things can be true at once. I can know that my parents didn't get what they needed, and they just passed on to me what they got.
Sure, right.
But at some point, and this is where, to me, this work is just a temporary piece of work. We have to be able to say to the child, it's okay for you to be angry and sad about what happened to you, and to have your day in court. And then I think when you do that, you move from what I call a head forgiveness to a heart forgiveness. So the first goal is for each person to go back and re-look at what happened to them as kids. Some people know exactly what happened. Other people have a lot of memory gaps. Some people are in denial about parts of the story. And so the work of the group initiative, everybody does a genogram, which is the 3-generational look at their family, and looking at the patterns. And we're kind of getting to know the cast of characters that form this inner child. And so being able to have someone stand up and tell their story and show their genogram is an amazing experience. Right. And you learn so much about people, and you start to see why they have the beliefs they have, why they have the, why they deal with their feelings the way that they do, all of that. Once we get to the truth and sort of understand what the story is about each child, then we have to do the business with it emotionally. Kids are born screaming for help, and something shuts them down. If a child is not telling a parent that they're upset, something has happened to make them know that it's not safe to do that. So experiential therapy is really about creating new experiences that change the old ones. And it is, I have probably 15 or 20 different kinds of experientials that people do. They can also make up their own, but I'll give you sort of a basic idea of what it would be. You might put a picture of, let's say, your father, especially one when he was young and parenting you, and you put it in the chair, and then beforehand, I have the person write a letter on behalf of their inner child to say to the father how he parented this child and how this person feels about it. And it is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And in fact, people are nervous about it at first, but as they start to do it, they literally can see the parent in the chair. And a lot of feeling comes up and a lot of truth telling happens, and it's incredibly healing.
Yeah.
Because basically what we're doing is we're really having an opportunity to have this child have their day in court, to finally speak the truth and have their feelings about what happened to them. One of the things I love about group is that you can see somebody else's stuff more clearly than your own. So you have a room full of people really paying attention, and they see stuff that they can then reflect back to the person in an amazing way. That was the first goal, which is to basically grieve the loss of a normal childhood and to finish business with mom and dad through experiential therapy. And so the group becomes a very safe laboratory for people to practice new skills. The biggest thing to me is learning how to resolve conflict. People get triggered in the present. So something happens in the present that triggers you to that well of pain.
Yeah.
And then all of that energy goes on to the person who triggered you. And so there's what I call a bump.
Yep.
And then there's the well of pain that connects you to. And so my husband and I developed this tool called the 1, 2, 3. And it is a difficult tool. And at first you need a moderator to do it, but over time it becomes something that you use fairly easily. But I have found it works better. And it is amazing to me when I watch people go through it that literally you feel closer to the person and you resolve it. And that is huge.
Sure.
The third goal is, even though the experiences are very powerful, and, I think people who go on weekend workshops will come back and say, wow, I had an amazing cathartic experience that really changed me. I have found that over time it fades. And it fades, and then people are back to the old belief systems and all these behavior. It's really discouraging. And so I realized that I needed to find a tool that would solidify the change of experience that the experientials brought about. And I found this tool called dialoguing. And that was from the first person I heard about it from was Chief Hatchling, who was an artist working with block artists. And she would have them use their non-dominant hand to get unlocked. And then she got into her own inner child recovery and found that the non-dominant hand connects to the part of the brain where the inner child experience is stored. One of the things that's most fascinating to me with brain research is that traumatic events are not stored on the timeline. So therefore, when you go back to one, you have no clue that it happened 30, 40, 50 years ago. It feels like it's happened. And so, just technically what you do is you write back and forth between your right and your left hand. You have a piece of paper, and I'm right-handed, so this is my adult. I might write a question to my child, and then put my hand in the other hand, and then the child responds. And it is unbelievable what comes up.
Yeah.
And I think you get feeling and information that it might take years of talk therapy to get to. It's just incredible. And what I tell people is, when you dialogue, you're going to be, it's as if you have a foster child coming in, and you know their history, and you're going to be their new parent. So of course you would talk to them about what happened, and you'd help them have their feelings and know the truth about it. But you'd also be parenting them every day and being the mother or father they never had, which means saying that you love them, saying that constantly have communication with them in a way that they didn't get growing up.
Right.
So I have clients who have hundreds, we have notebooks of dialogues because they're dialoguing all the time. And literally, the other thing about brain research is dialoguing is reprogramming the brain. So that neurons that wire together, you're basically changing your brain chemistry with the new information. And so that's why it's so important to, when you've had an experiential, for example, then to dialogue with it. Let's say you had an experiential where you finally went, oh my God, I wasn't a dumb kid. I was actually smart, but I was told I was dumb all the time. You were wrong.
Yeah.
Then I would have them maybe do a 30-day dialogue program where they dialogue every day and reinforce this with their kid. Remember, you're not dumb. Let's talk about it. Let's have some more feelings toward mom and dad. I want you to tell me all the ways that you felt smart today. I'm going to tell you some ways I saw you being smart today.
Perfect. No, I just kind of,
You know, good parents have to repeat. And these things that got cemented in came through repetition. So it's repetition that replaces them. I had a client once, this was actually with a real child, and she went through a divorce, and she discovered that her little girl, I think she was probably 6, really believed she caused the divorce. And so what she did was, for a period of 2 or 3 months, every night at bed, she would talk to her little girl about it and say, you know what, you didn't cause this. And she would answer questions and be able to have her feelings about the divorce, but kept coming back to, you didn't cause it.
wow.
And she found that over time, I want to know more things about groups. I think most people are nervous about group and maybe resistant to group. You think about our first family was a group, and having another experience of people, you know, if you had a violent father, let's say, having men in a group who are amazing and are gentle and listen to
So
you
true,
say
sure.
is really healing. But I think that there's, I go very, very slowly when I do these groups. I want people to really take their time, see if I'm safe, see if the other people are safe. We
Right.
don't even do experientials usually for 6 to 8 months because we wouldn't be safe.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
it's just a very, very slow process. And if too much go into that, they start to see the value of it and start to move forward to come.
So that one is about trauma groups in specific. I was trying to see if the groups you guys will lead will be in person too. If that's the case, I can pick them up on YouTube Live for everybody. With trauma groups, there's a lot of different things that we do to work through those challenges. That can be slightly challenging at times, but important to consider because we all have our different traumas that we bring. You have to watch out for a group if there's even someone who may come by to sabotage a group. So there's a lot on trauma therapy because we do that as group therapy. And
Ari, and Sergeant Arnold went to Vietnam in 1967, served with the 25th Infantry, 3rd Brigade Headquarters Recon. I had the direct experience of fighting 2 wars, one in the field against the Viet Cong, another back in base camp against racism in the military. It was very real in the war zone. And so there's 2 aspects of stress. Coming back from Vietnam, I wasn't prepared for my stressors to see hearing firecrackers go off and reacting as if I was in the field, dodging, ducking other things, stuff like that. But it was the stresses around the sounds and vulnerableness of the community in which I really adjusted to, all that stuff. So in transition, I had this, not my hand was free. I was offered police officer, I never decided what there in one, and so I went to the post office. In the post office, I found out that they were shipping money from a military post in Germany to be burned in Washington, D.C. And so through my contacts in the post office, I found out about it and I liberated that money. And I subsequently was incarcerated for that, about 4 months later. That's where my life began, in prison, because I had enough time to get away from the rigors of the transition to begin to be more introspective about myself and what happened, and to become disciplined. When I was doing a little, I found a claim for PTSD at the VA regional office. Gave me a quick interview, dismissed me. Because again, at that time, PTSD was not in the diagnostic manual for mental health. I told myself, my diagnosis is tied towards my anger around having to fight those two wars. And it took about 4 years to get that through in that language in my medical records. I held my ground and finally got the diagnosis. The therapy that I received and the counseling that I received was pretty much with other veterans, groups of counseling with other veterans who was over in the same war era that I was. So we can sit down and talk to each other about that. And that was the primary therapy for Vietnam veterans, group dynamics, group counseling. And my subsequent management of, in terms of counseling and therapy, was with engaging with psychiatrists at the VA and talking through the situation. Veterans, please involve yourself with other veterans. Talk to each other, share your experiences. That's the best therapy you can get anywhere. We can use the VA hospitals as resources for us to repair ourselves. Go to the VA and receive the assistance that you earn, the benefits that you earn. It makes your transition much more smoother, all right, and less stressful.
All right, so some of the stuff with PTSD you can get further into. And if you're running a trauma group, that's a good one. I can also send materials for that if you make the request to run a trauma group. Obviously the Girl Circle groups are okay, and there's 10 you can choose from. So ideally we will see you guys on Wednesday, and if you're leading your group, just let me know, just put the date in. So see you then.